Hi, guys. Welcome to episode 2 of Departure Dialogues with your host. I'm Madison. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for opening your mind and your heart to hearing information that might not be talked about on a daily basis because we avoid it, or just information that you feel like you want to learn from. I appreciate you being here, and I appreciate you listening to my first episode before this as well. So, thank you for that. Today's episode is going to be more along the lines of many faces of grief that we just don't talk about enough, or we avoid, or we just face challenges all the time, and like how I navigate those things. And maybe you can relate somehow, some way. But I think it's a good thing to just talk about types of grief, just because if you're feeling a way and you don't know why, this could be why, because you're grieving something. So I want to get into it. If you see me looking down and you're watching this on video, it's because I love to take notes. So I wrote some notes before this. So the first thing is, grief isn't limited to loss. It's not just a loss of a loved one. I know when you think about grief, you think about because you lost somebody, but it is all types of transitions, I would say. Later on, I'll talk more about it, but I feel like we're all definitely grieving COVID and the pandemic and all of those challenges that we faced, but I will talk about that a little bit later. We're going to just talk about the first one, which is traditional form, and that's losing a loved one firsthand. If you've ever experienced it, you know that grief is just, I'm always going to repeat the word grief because sometimes you need to hear things repeatedly in order for it to really sink in. But when I lost my dad, I feel like I'm still obviously processing all of it. And so it's a lot different than somebody else who lost a parent who they may have had their childhood and adult life with. And for me, I already was grieving our relationship because I lost my dad when I was 7, and not physically lost him, but like I lost him as in he moved back to Nigeria and I was still in the States. And so I haven't physically gotten to see him since I was 7 years old. So I was already trying to navigate our relationship long distance, and like this is long distance because he's really, really far. Also, didn't get my passport until around recently, like right before he passed. There's that as well. And so I think how I was navigating my life when he wasn't here physically was just me creating what if memories. Sorry, my dog she's crying. She's crying. She's doing that thing. Girl, sit. Thank you. Yeah, I feel like because he wasn't here for a lot of my life, it was just me creating like what if moments. For instance, when I graduated high school, it was like, what if he can come see me graduate? It was me visualizing him watching me graduate. When I was in college, it was, what if he can come down and see me in college? Is he going to see me graduate? And then in my adult life, it's just all the things that I'm navigating that you feel like you would need your father for or any parent for. I was craving that. I wanted that, and I couldn't have that. It was just all virtual. So I was learning how to navigate a relationship with someone who I was a daddy's girl to, all virtually, and figure that out. And I think because of that, there was a lot of, how do I say? There was a lot of regret to when after he physically died, but also like while he was here, there was a lot of, what's the word? I can't think of the word right now. My brain, it's Monday. I guess it was just a lot of me kind of neglecting our relationship because he wasn't here. So I would go days without speaking to him. If he messaged me, I would be upset because he's not really here. So it was just a lot of that going on. And then after he passed, it was a lot of me beating myself up for it. So I will say, if you are someone who navigating relationships with parents in general is hard, and we all know this, whatever the relationship may be with whoever's in your life, I will say, just from somebody who is processing a loss, I wish that I would have communicated more to my dad. And he was my biggest fan and always reached out, and we talked on FaceTime. Like, I wrote him a letter. There was a lot of things that I'm happy that I got out that I shared with him, and like bits of my life that he's seen, and I've sent him a lot of pictures and everything. But I think I wish I would have just communicated with him more and like dove deep into my relationship with him as an adult, and I didn't get to do that. And so I would say that anyone who is navigating hard relationships with your parents, like I would just say they're still learning too. This is their first life as well. And if you could just like communicate anything that you feel that they should know, I would just do it now before it's too late. And so that's something that I'm constantly thinking about. That's my grief right now, and my way of healing is just navigating our relationship and like facing that head on before I can navigate him actually not being here. One of my friends messaged me the other day, love you, shout out, you know who you are if you're listening. And she was telling me that she thought it was like pretty much powerful that during my first episode, I didn't cry talking about my dad, because for her loss, every time she mentions her dad, she cries. And I think like if you can cry and let it out, that's super powerful, because I wish I can. But since I'm navigating my loss a lot differently, it's almost like I don't know that it's real yet. I'm talking about it, I'm like letting people know I miss him and the relationship and everything, but I think that my brain is still not processing that he's actually not here, because he was already not here for half of my life. So if you have the tool to cry over your loss, feel that, really feel that, because I wish I can do it. And this is like me getting very vulnerable, but I wish I can cry over my loss. I think I have some days where I really think about him and I do get very emotional, but in the back of my mind, it's like something's telling me like, it's okay. Don't shed the tears. And I wish I can. I really do. I know that I can. It's in me. I feel it. I think I just need to let go. But I think I'm still holding on to hope of him being here, which sounds crazy. So that's traditional form of loss, is just actually losing somebody, a loved one, and trying to navigate that. I would say also in my grief, I experienced in the beginning stages, I was crying a lot. I didn't want to talk to anybody, except those that were reaching out, like my very close friends. It kind of helped talking about it to them, but even then, it was kind of hard. I would say I was eating a lot of salt. I love salt now, but like I was just eating a lot of salt. I was craving a lot of like fatty foods. I was craving a lot of grease, like things that I don't really crave on a normal daily basis. I was craving a lot of that because it was bringing me comfort. I would say like I would listen to a lot of music that can probably bring me to the place of me like hanging out with my dad. I was drinking a lot of wine because he drank wine, so I was trying to do things that I know that could help me think about him in the best way possible. I think there was also a lot of just like irritability, or me being angry, or me seeing other people with their fathers now, and like me saying like, dang, I really don't have that. Like that's not gonna happen for me anytime soon, or never anymore, because he's not here. So it was just a lot of me comparing. I think comparison is obviously a thief of joy, and we all know that, but like when you really actually like lose somebody, that figure in your life, and then you see other people have it, I think it's easy to compare both relationships, or just, you know, wishful thinking of them wanting of you wanting them to be here. There's so many different stages of grief. I think I'm still in the first stage. I don't even think I've reached acceptance yet. And I thought that I have reached that, but I'm learning now that I have not. And I talked to my therapist about it, and she told me that I really need to at least take once a week to induce my grieving process. And I know that sounds crazy, but like I need to like force myself to grieve. And so I can give any advice to anybody who's lost somebody who is still kind of not acknowledging the loss. I would say to kind of just force yourself and put yourself in it. Whatever that means for you. If it's listening to their favorite song in the car, at home, blasting it, dancing, that's a type of healing too. If it's writing them a letter, looking at a picture of them, that's a type of healing too. If it's just going outside, putting your feet on the ground because it's grounding, that's a form of healing too. But actually forcing yourself to be in those situations helps, because my therapist was saying later on down the line, 3 to 5 years from now, I don't want to be in regret that I didn't do all of those things, and I have to like process grief in a whole different way. So I'm really grateful that she told me that, because now I have to like really put myself in it and put in the work. Talking about it on the podcast It really helps as well because it's also another form of me exploring my grief. But then again, I do need to put myself in those situations. So if you're listening to this and you want to hold me accountable, we can hold each other accountable. I'll do a check in and just check on each other and make sure that we kind of really face our grief head on. So that's the first form, is traditional form. Another form of grief is transitions. Ending a relationship also feels like a big loss that someone has died. You know, when you like go through a breakup and it feels like the end of the world, I would say like that is another form of grief. You're navigating your new life without that person in it anymore. You're asking your questions of what if this would have happened? What if we changed this? Why didn't it work? Same thing as the loss of a loved one. You are reflecting on the relationship. Maybe you're scrolling, looking at their posts. You're looking at the posts of you guys together. You're looking at photos. That's the same thing as a loss. And I think a lot of times we don't like to call it grief because you might think it's not similar, but it is. It's the same thing with parents navigating their children leaving the nest. If you're a parent and you're listening to this and like your child got older and they're no longer living at home, that's navigating a new life of what you're going to do without them there. It's the same exact thing. I remember my first breakup, like with my first actual relationship, I literally sat in my room, dark, blinds closed, couldn't see through. I didn't care what time of day it was. Just cried and cried and cried. Put my face under my blanket, cried, didn't talk to anyone, was ignoring everybody. I think I went out and got Wingstop with my mom, then came back home, ate the one wing because I wasn't hungry. You lose your appetite. And then I just cried again. It was also the time during my birthday, and I went and I was like, oh my God, guys, let's go do karaoke. Turns out everybody wanted to sing a love song during karaoke, and I was going through it, crying on my birthday, crying. Everybody's looking at me like, what's going on? I have somebody singing Love by Keisha Cole. I'm a mess. Loss it's with everything. Every situation, we all go through it. Even if you're fighting with somebody, you're still going through some type of grief. And it's just more of like acknowledging those feelings and not running from them. And so it's so weird for me to say, but like processing like a grief in a relationship is a lot easier for me than processing this loss of my dad. I'm able to like really put myself through all of the mental things that I'm going through when I am grieving a relationship, like when I'm thinking about everything that me and that person been through and like really sitting in it. It's super easy for me to do that. And then I'm coming out on top right after. You got that revenge body, revenge this, revenge that. You're going out, you're living a whole new life, right? It's the same thing with my dad, but it's a lot different than the revenge aspect of it. Now I'm like living a whole new life knowing that somebody is not ever going to come back. And it's the same thing in a relationship, of course, but this time it's like, this is like an actual parent. This is like somebody you've talked to your whole life. They know the ins and outs of who you are. And it's the same thing with the relationship, but it is also very different to navigate the two and know the difference, but you still dive deep and you still have to figure out what is really bothering you and stopping you from like sitting in your feelings when it comes to loss. It's just so crazy how I'm having like a light bulb moment, me mentioning besides the revenge body part and revenge in general. It's just so crazy how similar the loss of like your partner is versus the loss of like a loved one. Both of them are loved ones, and you still feel a lot of pain when it comes to both of them. But it's easier to just transition and find another loved one, right? But I can't find another dad. So that's the main difference I feel when it comes to the loss of a relationship versus the loss of the physical person's body no longer being here. But I will say, if you are going through a breakup and you are like, I just really feel like the whole world is on my shoulders, I understand, and it's okay. And I feel like you need to sit in that and you really need to acknowledge what you're feeling, and you need to write everything down that you're feeling in your notes, in your journal. However you want to take that loss, you really need to navigate it. And it's really easy for us to, go to the gym, go work out, go get our mind off of what we're feeling. But I really think it's important that you don't do it right away. Like, yeah, the gym makes you feel good and like going out makes you feel good, but it makes you like not think about something for a little bit, which is nice. But it's also very powerful that you do sit in your feelings. I think it's very important, and I think it puts you on top. And it's a lesson that I'm still trying to navigate when it comes to traditional form loss. It's easy for me to do it with life transition loss, but traditional form loss, still hard. I'm still navigating it. Another type of loss I would say is the grief of getting older, just dealing with like morality and aging, which is, it's a very beautiful thing to get older. I feel like people are like, oh my gosh, you're almost 30, like, but like, what do we expect somebody to look like when they're getting 30? Like, why do we expect 30s to be so old? Like, that's not old at all. That's still young. 40s still young. 50s still young. Like, 60s still young. Like, I don't know why we think, like, when we hear getting older, we get super scared. I think it's, like, beautiful that we're able to age, right? But then again, I think the thing that we're scared of is, like, what's next after we get old. And I don't think that we're able to really talk about it because it is so taboo. But like, I think my scary thoughts of getting older is just like, what's next after I'm old and where is life going to take me next? I think that another form of just getting older and grieving that is like, for me, it's hard to look. I love my grandma. Like, we are yin and yang, like we are buds. But sometimes it's hard for me to like look at my grandma because she's getting older. And I think that that's just the truth. Like, I can hear my mom now, like, you need to call your grandma, call your grandma, call your grandma. But I don't think anyone understands that sometimes it's really hard for me to do that because I just know that she's getting older and like, the clock is ticking. And I never know like when her, we don't know when their time is. And so that's my reality of like, when I'm saying grief of getting older, for me, it's like navigating life again without somebody. And my mind automatically goes to like, what's next? When is it time? When is it coming? And I just don't know how to deal with it. And so, I don't know, I'm be curious if anybody replies and can let me know if they feel the same exact way. Even if of their parents, anybody in your life who's a little bit older and you're just like, you sometimes can be around them, but you can't because you feel like what's next to come is really going to hurt. And that's like the honest truth. If anybody is in the same boat, please let me know because I don't talk about it a lot, but that's one of like my fears is just losing somebody else. Losing anybody in general was always my fear, but now that it has happened and I know it can happen obviously to anybody, I think that's just a constant thing in my mind of when I'm looking at my grandma. It's like, oh, you're older and your life is like so precious and you've gone through a lot of life, but now it's really precious and I have to like, with the fact that you might not be here later on. So that's one of my grief of getting older, just like morality in general. Even with me, like in the nighttime, those thoughts creep up of like, what's going to be next? You're going to be 30 soon. And 30 is a good age, but like time does not stop. So I think that's the main thing with the grief of getting older. I think this also has to do and tie in with like the future loss. I think that we all think about the future a lot. And if you don't think about the future, kudos to you if you don't think about the future. It's hard not to, for me at least. Like, I think about the future a lot. I think about what my life is going to be like in the future. And sometimes it's really hard for me to stay in the present because I'm so busy thinking about what's next. And I really need to focus on what I have right now. But I think it's just the fact of like, we don't really know what's next. And we're a little bit scared and we're terrified to want to keep moving on with our lives when we feel like we're in the unknown. But if you think about it, that is also the beauty of life, is being in the unknown and not knowing what's next and navigating that. I think I need to navigate where I'm at right now versus where I'm going to be at in the next 20 years. that reminds me, maybe people in the interviews, whoever's interviewing someone for a job, that 5-year question, do you really want to know what I think my life will be like at work in 5 years? Because I don't know if I really want to be working in 5 years. So maybe when it comes to like future loss, a lot of our outside resources should stop asking those future questions because it just stresses everyone out. I know y'all agree. Whoever is going through that interview phase, like I am right now, or trying to figure out what's next when it comes to work and the future, I feel like society makes it seem like we really need to know what's next. And I feel like it's so easy to just get in that bubble and get stuck of like, damn, I got to figure this shit out right now. But you don't. You don't really need to figure it out. We don't have it all figured out. No one has it figured out. Like, we need to take our time. I feel like it's so easy in this life to rush things and not take our time. For instance, Halloween's coming up. I'm already thinking about like, oh, my Halloween costume. But like, can I just live for this week? Or like when you go to the store and they already have Valentine's Day up, different things for Valentine's Day, and it's December. Like, can we get through the new year? It's always like a rush. It's always something more that we should be longing for in the future. And I feel like it makes it so complicated to just be in the present and focus on what we got going on right now. And I feel like it's the same thing when it comes to grief because you're trying to navigate a life that you haven't lived yet because it's so far ahead in the future. I feel like it's so easy to like grief loss of a dream, something that didn't happen for you or you don't even know the answer to yet, but you already feel so sad, you feel so sick, you feel so anxious. You can't think, you can't sleep, you can't focus on what's going on right in front of you because you're so busy thinking about what's next. It's just so easy to get lost in life. And I think we all, as a society, should just like do better with focusing on what we have going on for ourselves right now. We all have milestones, and some milestones don't happen, and we end up getting very sad about it. We talk down on ourselves about it. We're very upset. And I feel like those are all underlying pains and very unspoken pains that we haven't really gotten to talk about, because who do you talk about that with? I know maybe you talk about it with your best friend or your partners, but at the end of the day, it's like something that you're really trying to grapple with. And I feel like it's very hard and it's very painful to feel like a milestone's coming up and then you lost that, or you feel like something good is really supposed to happen, like with work or a promotion, or you're really kind of manifesting that it happens and then it doesn't, and then you grieve that loss and you're upset again. It's like a kind of like a 360. I feel like we go through this constantly where you want something so bad and then when you don't get it, it just feels like the whole world is crumbling down and there's nothing left. And that's why I think it's super, super important to sit in those feelings. Like I was saying earlier, if you are going for a promotion or a better position at work and you don't get it when you want it, or you just don't get it at all, I'm telling this to myself as well too. I'm literally telling this to myself, but to whoever relates, this is for you as well. Sit in that emotion, cry about it for a little bit, tell yourself it's okay, shit's gonna be figured out, because look where you are now. Shit was figured out the whole entire time throughout your life. It's figured out. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna live. You're gonna be all right. Keep going and push through. Don't let you not getting that promotion or new job stop you from the next position. Rejection is redirection, and I will say it all the time. Rejection is redirection. What's meant for you will be for you, and just don't get lost in trying to find what's right for you. It's so weird to grieve a future that I haven't even looked at yet. I feel like one of my things that I'm really going through, besides the loss of my dad and loss of relationships in the past and friendships and everything, is just grieving a future that I'm not even looking at yet. I have so many goals. I feel so many goals that sometimes it gives me a headache. Like I'm super tense, I'm super stressed over these goals that I feel like I need to attain. And it's just so weird to like be very, very sad and put myself down over something that hasn't even happened yet, or I don't even know if it's going to happen yet. And I think that I just need to get better with letting life take its course and being okay with where I'm at now, as bad as I want the next thing, as bad as I want another job right now. At least I have a job right now. At least I can pay my rent right now. At least I have a roof over my head, because there's people who do not have that. At least I can feed myself. At least I can go to the grocery store. Flip your mindset. I've been seeing a lot of videos of people making something negative sound super positive. Like, I don't have the job that I want right now, but I do have a job and it's paying me, and I can take my PTO and I can still navigate and live my life and do all my other fun activities when I want to do them. And that's great, right? It's the same thing as, oh, I'm not dating this person anymore, but I still get to experience life and go on different dates and see what I like, see what I don't like, and I have that opportunity to do it, right? So it sounds like the negative to a positive. Redirecting your mindset, it's just the best way to do it. Anytime anything negative comes up, redirect it and make it into a positive. Even if it doesn't sound like it would be a positive, still make it into one. Oh, I can't get these jeans. The jeans don't fit. Okay, girl, that's okay. The jeans don't fit. That means you can get some better ones that do fit. Like, you can find some jeans that will fit. Jean shopping is the worst anyways. I don't even know why I use that example. Jean shopping, I hate it. Like, I wish I can just snap my fingers and the jeans that I want and fit are on my body. So worst example, but you get the point. Just redirecting your mindset. I feel like redirecting, grieving about the future, maybe make it into a positive grief, which sounds crazy because grief, when you think of grief, it's sad. But make it into a positive grief. Make it into like, yeah, I'm not there yet. I don't have that, but I'm going to get it tomorrow. And right now I can at least step outside and smell the polluted air. The polluted air right now with all the fires and things. You can go outside and you can smell that and get allergies. You could smell that. So just redirect it into something positive, although polluted air, yuck. Climate, yuck. But that's another story for a different day. Also, collective grief would be the last one. I think this is something we can all relate to because we are all still grieving the pandemic, COVID, what we went through. We lost some years, okay? How old was I in COVID? 23? 23? I think I was 23. I think we lost, what, 2 years. So technically right now I'm 28. I'm gonna be 29, but I really am 20, 25, 26, if that makes sense. Like, we're all collectively as a unit still going through the loss and the grief process of the pandemic, of knowing how to communicate. That's something that we lost as a unit. I don't think enough people talk about it, but going out in public and communicating with somebody is super hard to do now because we didn't do it for some years and we were so used to being behind a screen that now when you're going out, nobody knows how to communicate. It was so crazy because I was in Arizona for one of my good friend's bachelorettes, and we're like, buy the bride a drink, buy the bride a drink. It was so easy for the girls. You would think the guys would buy the drink, but it was the girls out there were doing it. And I was like, sometimes, I don't know, I feel like the pandemic just made it hard for these men to know how to communicate outside. They were just so nervous to even say hello to the group. Nobody wanted to talk, or if they did, it was super random, something weird because they didn't know how to communicate. I just think it's just so crazy that we don't know how to have a conversation outside. And that's something that we all lost. I feel that's something that we're all trying to navigate and that we're grieving is the loss of the art of communicating. The art of communicating has died, and I hope it gets better. Not to sound like a Debbie Downer or anything, but I just feel like just going out and having a conversation with whoever that you're doing it with, a random, it's just hard for anyone to have a conversation and communicate. And I feel like the pandemic really started that, and I don't think we talk about that enough. I don't think that we talk about the loss of normalcy. I don't think that we talk about how the ongoing changes of the world has caused us a lot of grief. The climate, the political warfare going on right now, relationships, us trying to navigate and find somebody through a phone versus finding somebody in public. That's not talked about enough. I don't like social media in general, making us feel very behind, even though we're not. Everyone's journey is different. That has a lot to do with what we're grieving. I think as a society, we're all still grieving and figuring things out. A lot of us are new to anxiety. And if you're new to anxiety, I understand. I feel you. I've had anxiety my whole life, but I just understand people now when they're like, I just feel very anxious. These are all new things that we have developed since the pandemic, and it's just not talked about enough. And it's a loss. It's a grief. We're all feeling it as one together. And I think the point of my episode today is I wrote it down, so I'm looking down at these notes because I want to make sure I say it right. But the point of this episode is to reflect on your own life and any silent grief that you haven't acknowledged. It's just to really just sit down and figure out what the fuck is up. You know, why do you feel this way? What are you grieving? What is something that you lost, or what is something that you wanted so bad that you didn't get? Figure those things out, and that's the first step. Maybe think about something you noticed about yourself in the pandemic, like before the pandemic and after the pandemic. What has changed about you, or what has changed about the world that you miss and that you're grieving? It's just easy for us to like navigate and feel like we need to like move forward. But if you don't talk about all of those things in the past that have happened to you that made you who you are right now, then it's hard to move forward. And I don't think you're really moving forward in how you should when you don't acknowledge all of those things that has happened before that make you sad. Sometimes you get this random anxious feeling and you're like, why do I feel this way? Like even in the movies, why am I feeling anxious watching this movie right now? But it's all of the things that happened even prior to the pandemic with shootings, and then in the pandemic weren't able to go to the movies, and now we're all able to sit next to each other. Now we're all like germaphobes in our own ways as well. Like, why do we feel those things? Why do we feel that way? And how are we gonna push forward after we really acknowledge and grief the changes as a society that we go through? I think this is what I want you to get from this episode, is just navigating your own grief and the silent grief that you deal with. How do we move forward? How do we change things? A prompt that I wanted to share with you is, what is something you've lost in life, whether it be a person, a dream, a version of yourself, that you haven't fully grieved? I want you to sit down and answer that question and really think about it. I guess with you guys, since this is a vulnerable platform and I want to share everything, I think the answer to that question for me is I haven't fully grieved my dad. It's still hard for me to sit down and really acknowledge that he is not here in the physical and will never be in the physical. I haven't gotten to where I would want in the workplace, and sometimes I talk down on myself like, oh, I'm not good enough. There's a lot of learning to do, which there's a lot of learning to do all the time, but I get down on myself about it. I feel like I'm not good enough to get to where I want to be and why it's not happening for me. I feel like I grieve that all the time, especially this last year, because I want something so bad. I feel like a version of myself that I have lost is like my creativity. And since I get down on myself about my aspirations and where I want to go and like those milestones I want to reach, it stops me from being creative. And I don't really talk about that often. Yes, I'm doing this podcast. I would like to call it a chat. Even though I'm holding a mic and talking to you, you could say it's a podcast, but it's like a journal entry that you're reading. I would say, yeah, I'm doing this and it's like a creative outlet, but there's still so much more in me that I want to let out. But I feel like I'm still not letting that version of myself come out, and I'm grieving the old me, the old Maddie, and where she has gone. So those are the answers to my prompt that I gave you guys, and hopefully I can see you guys in the comments or the next episode and you letting me know what you're navigating. I will see you guys next week. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it, or watching, however you are listening and taking in this episode. I really appreciate it, and I hope to see you guys next week. All right, bye.